1 Samuel 17 is introduced talking about how Goliath, who's a Philistine giant, challenges the Israelites to a battle. And this Goliath is not your average, maybe typical person you might have in your mind, but he is literally a giant. He's 9 foot tall. He is like the strongest person you could imagine. He's wearing a bronze coat that weighs 125 pounds, which is about 8 stones. That's the average, maybe teenager, young adult kind of weight. And he's carrying that as his coat, so you can only imagine how strong he is. And this story is talking about how Goliath saying to the Israel army, if I want to challenge you to a fight, if you win, then we'll become your slaves, we'll work for you, we'll be under your control, but if we win, vice versa. And at this threat, the Israelites understandably are freaking out. They're like, what? There's no way that one of our men is going to be able to come and fight this giant Goliath and win this battle. They just can't believe it. And for 40 days the Israelite army is afraid and shocked, and they're kind of spending these 40 days just sat worrying and not doing much. A bit of background on the Israelite army is that they are they know God, they are in a relationship with God, they worship God, they know who he is, yet they're having this fear and they're spending these 40 days just worrying, being like, I can't fight this Goliath person, so God must have just been making it up. There's no way that this can happen, there's no way that God could work this out and enable one of our men to fight this tall 9 foot giant who's the strongest person ever. And I'd really encourage you to read 1 Samuel 17, as it's too long for me to read to you now because that would probably send you to sleep, but have a go and try and read through it just to familiarise yourself with it if you don't already know it. And David, who's this very small boy is what he's described as in this passage. He's tiny in comparison to Goliath. He works with his father, looking after the sheep, looking after the animals. So he's very much not the type of person that you would send forward to fight this giant. And after these 40 days have gone past, David's father says, "I'll go and take this basket to the men, just let me know what's happening. Basically, get all the drama for me and let me know, give me an update on what's happening." So David goes and delivers this basket and starts to hunt around, asks all the men, what's happening, who's going to go and fight this Goliath, what's your plan of action? And a lot of people have seen him, they just don't understand why he's here. What is he doing? He's not going to be able to do anything. He's this tiny little boy who's not going to be able to fight Goliath. He's thin, he's small, he's not as tall. He can't put on an 8 stone jacket and carry that into fighting. But in verse 32, David says to Saul, who's the king of the Israelite army, "Don't worry about this Philistine," David told Saul. "I'll go fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," said Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy and he's been a man of war since his youth." And first of all, I think that's so amazing because obviously what you can kind of get from the passage about what's going to happen is that God's going to use this man who seems like the least, the worst choice that could be put forward to fight this giant. Basically the Israel army need to pick one man to go and fight this Goliath in order for the whole thing to be won. They're trusting on this one man that they send forward, and you're thinking David's obviously not going to be this person because he is the lowest on the choice. There's a list and he's right at the bottom. But David, volunteers himself, and none of the other men are volunteering themselves. They are spending 40 days being afraid, yet David just comes along and just don't worry, I'll do it, no problem. But in verse 34 it says, "But David persisted. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats," he said. "When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I've done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine." And I think that is just so amazing that David is going into this so confident that God's rescued me before, he's going to do it again. he has got such confidence. I think this is so encouraging. That little line in verse 37, the Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. He's done it once and he'll do it again. And I think I read that this morning and I was just so encouraged that, like, we can know that God's got us because he's done it before. If we think about our lives now, he's already made the first move. He sent his son down to die for us. Christ has already died for us, meaning that we can have eternal life if we choose to have faith and put our trust in Jesus and know that he died for us. So God's already made the first move and he's already been faithful for us. And there may be other times that you know in your life where God has actually been faithful and things have happened that you're like, he has rescued me before like a billion times. Or maybe it's not as clear to you, but he's already given Jesus. So we all have that one thing at least that God has done for us. And David is saying here that God's already rescued me from when I'm having to fight the lions, fight the bears, and protect my sheep. So I know that he's going to protect me from this Philistine, from this giant who seems so undefeatable, yet I know that God will do it. And I think that's so encouraging that God gives the strength to this small person. God doesn't care about appearances. He doesn't care what you look like. He doesn't care about your occupation. He doesn't care about what you do with your life, how good you look. He's not, God's not like society. He doesn't look on those things. God looks at your heart and knows that actually I've put this in you. And God put the power in David to fight the Philistine. And it was because of God's strength that David could go forward and fight and end up, spoiler alert, killing Goliath. And I think that's just so encouraging that all these other men, this whole group of army is absolutely petrified of this giant. They spend 40 days just sat around like being so nervous. David just comes along straight away, is like, I'll go, I'll do it, because I know that God's rescued me before, so he's going to do it again. And if you think about it, you may go through battles in life that are difficult. Maybe they're like really difficult compared to other people's battles. But like personally, I've never been through a battle in this kind of sense where like I'm going up against this like tall person that I've actually physically got to fight. But just knowing that God actually gives the power and he's like got his Holy Spirit in me so that I can go and do things. I can go forward in his name because I know that he's been faithful and I know that he will be again. And skipping forward, David is given armour to fight Goliath by King Saul. But David puts it on and he says, I can't go in these. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again. And I think that's so important because it's no good putting on somebody else's armour. And David is kind of symbolising that only in God's name can we be confident. Only in God's name can we actually go forward in power and actually win the battles. It's only with God's help that we can do anything. And there's no use putting on useless armour of the world or like what society says will be helpful. No, it's what God says is helpful. And David just ends up taking a stick and a stone. And these stones, I read about it this morning, they tend to like, if you're like a good thrower at stones, then they can go about 100 miles an hour. And David actually ends up killing Goliath with just a stone. So he had been given this spear and this shield and all of this kind of like fancy armour. But David said, no, I don't want to use that. And he took like the basic of the basic. Like imagine people were like taking the best of the best to a war, and then you're casually just rolling up with a stick and a stone. You'd be like, this guy is not going to win. Like, what is he doing? Can you imagine all the people watching David as he walks up to Goliath doing this? And then you would kind of like, well, here we go. We're going to lose. Like, this is just ridiculous. But no, David goes up and he knows that he can do it through God, because God's given him the strength and God's rescued him before. So he knows that God's going to do it again. I think that's so important. And if you just flick to Matthew 11, verse 28, it says, Then Jesus said, Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. And I think that links so nicely with the passage in 1 Samuel, because Jesus is saying here that if you've got battles, if you've got things to fight, just come to me and I will give you rest. I will give you peace, and just like you can just let go at him and lay it all down at him. And I think that's so encouraging, that we can just give it all to him and we can just trust it all in him, knowing that he's got it. He's been faithful before, he's going to be faithful again. And when it says in verse 29, take my yoke upon you, a yoke is something that is like a wooden kind of plank almost that would tie between two like oxen, which are like cows basically, to help them carry a plough together in pairs. And when Jesus is talking about a heavy yoke or like a heavy burden, he's referring, because the people that were listening to this would have had like to be like obeying the law and like being oppressed and based on like legalism and all that kind of thing. So he's saying like you're under, like you've got a heavy yoke, like it's not good, like you're heavily burdened. But if you come to me, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And it's saying that actually, even though, you know, bad things might not go away, even though you've still got that yoke attached to you, you've still got that heavy thing that you might be pulling, it can be made lighter with Jesus, and you can pull it easier because Jesus is with you and he's helping you through it. And I think that's so key. Like David was literally doing that. He knew that God has been faithful before, so he went forward in faith and just trusted and knew that God was going to be faithful again. And it's just, we can do the same thing. We can go to Christ when we feel burdened, when we feel weary, when we feel tired, and we can just reach out to him, and he will give us his easy yoke, and he will teach us and give us the rest that we need, and we can just let it all at him. But that's just not to say that, you know, our battles won't go away. Like David knew that God would provide and help him through, but that didn't mean the battle was going to go away. David still had to go and fight Goliath. We still sometimes have to do the things that we don't want to do, the battles that we don't want to fight. We still have to go and fight them, but God can give us the strength that we need to pull through it, and to for it to not be as hard. And yeah, it's really amazing to see that. And I thought they just linked so nicely together. So I hope that encourages you, that whatever you're going through, whatever battle you may have faced already, you may be facing now, you may face in the future, God will help you through, and you can find rest in him. And just know that God has already been faithful in your life. He's already made the first move. He already created you for a reason. He sent his son to die for you because he wanted you to be able to live with him forever. And in that, you can just know that if he's done it once, he can do it again. And I think that's just so important, to start your week off knowing that God's been faithful before, and he's going to keep on being faithful. He doesn't ever give up on us, and he will forever be faithful and forever love us.